Hey guys, today I'm going to be doing a Jetphotos editing tutorial for you guys. So here we are in Adobe Lightroom, and we've got a 737 here. The photo I took was pretty dark, as you can probably tell. My settings were a little bit off, but there's nothing wrong with that. We can go ahead and fix it. The first thing I would suggest that you guys do is come over here to optics and go ahead and make sure your chromatic aberration and your lens correction are checked off. What the chromatic aberration is going to do is it's going to reduce color fringing, and the lens correction just corrects any lens errors. So once you've done that, the next step is you're going to want to go ahead and crop your photo. I would say the most common ones are 3x2, 16x9, and 10. For this photo, we're going to go with the 16x10, and then we're just going to bring our edges in here. And however close you want to make it is personal preference, but I like to leave a little bit of space for me personally. And once you've got it cropped like this, you want to go ahead and center your aircraft properly. And one trick that helps me is I bring my cursor over here and just press down, and it'll open up a grid for you. And you just want to align the center of the aircraft with the center of the grid. So this looks pretty good right here. So once we've got our aircraft centered, our next step is going to be to fix our horizon. So for this picture, the horizon doesn't really matter because you can't see it in the photo. So we can just leave it like that. And now we can begin editing the photo. Alright guys, so the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and sharpen up the plane. It's not a bad shot. It's pretty sharp to begin with, but typically I like to just go ahead and do 150 for all my photos. And if we zoom in here, it looks really good. It'll just need a tad bit of noise reduction, not too much though. We'll give it about 20 and that should be good. And a tip I can give you guys as far as sharpening and noise reduction is don't use too much noise reduction. I really struggled with that when I first started out on Jetphotos. So you want to make sure that you have grain in your shadows. I used to think that you have to use a bunch of noise reduction, but that's not true. So if your plane looks like this with grain in the shadows, that's perfect. And once we're done in our detail section, we're going to move up to effects. I don't touch anything here other than texture. I just add 5 texture every time. It just adds a little bit extra sharpness. But you don't have to. It's not really necessary. But it's just something I like to do. And moving up to color, generally don't touch anything here. Except sometimes your photos can turn out a little warm. And in that case, I'll usually bring down my temperature like 150. But this photo was taken during golden hour, so it's going to look a little warm. So we're not going to touch anything here today. Alright guys, and our final editing portion, moving up to the light section. The only things that we need to worry about here are exposure, contrast, and whites and blacks. You never want to use highlights or shadows. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with our exposure. And as you can tell, this is a pretty dark shot. So we're definitely going to need quite a bit of exposure here. So I'm going to do like 75. And that looks pretty good right there. Alright guys, so I just opened up my histogram here. And one thing that's really important you look at is your clipping arrows here. This one is for blacks and this one is for whites, and basically they just let you know when your photo is starting to get a little too overexposed. So essentially you want to bring your whites up until the arrow turns white, just like that, and then it's good. However, sometimes it can be misleading because if you have a portion of whites in your photo that's blown out, it'll incorrectly read it, trying to avoid your photo from becoming more blown out. So sometimes you're going to have to eyeball it yourself and just hope that you get it right. But now moving down onto blacks, clearly we don't have to change it much. So we're just going to bring it down right about there. And the contrast on this photo, it looks like it has a little too much, so I'm actually going to bring it back a hair, like right there. And as you can see, once we moved our contrast back, we clearly need to add a little bit more black. And there we go. So this is the edit done on the photo here. Next thing I do is I bring it over to Topaz. If you're curious on how I exported it out of Lightroom, I exported it at full quality. Alright guys, so here's the photo in Topaz. When I bring it over to Topaz, I only use it to sharpen. I try to avoid using denoise on Topaz, at least this version of Topaz, because typically it'll distort the text a little bit on the plane. So if you don't have other versions of Topaz where it's typically used for denoise, I would just use the Lightroom denoise because it actually works really well. So just avoid these avoid the suggestions down here. They're not useful. The only thing I do is I just sharpen it and I try and stay between 20 and 30. Leave the AI model on standard, but for your subject, change it to all, because sometimes when you try and select subject, it'll miss portions of the plane, and we want to make sure it's all evenly sharpened. So this is how it looks compared to the original. It just makes the text pop a little more, and that's all we do here. So the next we can do is export it, and our final step is going to be bringing it over to Photoshop. Okay, so now that we've got it in Photoshop, we just have some small things to do. We have to resize the image and get rid of our JPEG artifacts. So go over to the top left and go over to image, go to image size, and typically I keep it around 1280, so we can just do 1280, hit OK, and then hit Control 10 to bring it back to full screen here. And then the final step is to go up top to filter, go to neural filters, and then once your page loads all the way down at the bottom, go ahead and check off JPEG artifacts removal. And once that's done loading, hit OK. And then the last step is just to go ahead and save it. Once you hit save as, it's going to come up with this JPEG options. Make sure your quality is at maximum, and then just bring the file size all the way up to 12. You want it at the highest quality. And then once you're done with that, just hit OK, and you guys are good to upload to Jetphotos. Alright guys, and here is our photo on Jetphotos. I hope this tutorial helped you guys out a little bit or answer some questions that you may have. If you have any more, leave a comment below and I'll be sure to help you guys out. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.